Hi robot makers, this is the top 5 SMARS issues and how to fix them. So if you've been building a SMARS and you've been struggling with some, common issues that we all come across when we're building our SMARS robots, these 5 tips should help you get unstuck. So let's dive straight in. Okay, so first of all, batteries. This is one of the most common causes of issues. Let's dive straight into this. So removing the battery is a bit of an issue. If I just go over here to the overhead shot, unless you're using the SMARS version 4, which has a completely different battery compartment, it's designed to use like a LiPo battery. You're probably using a 9-volt battery, such as this one here. And if you need to change the battery, it's a bit of an issue because you've got all your wires plugged in there, you've got to slide this thing out, then if your wires are not quite long enough, you're going to struggle to get this thing out. And then if you can actually get this thing to just slide out, the battery is then held into place by these 2 motor holders. So you actually have to take these out, and these are not quite very easy to take out. They're designed to pressure fit. There's no screw or anything, so it's just the pressure of the plastic pushing against the sides of the chassis that's holding that in place. And depending on how well that's been printed, you might find that snaps, or this little piece here, which is quite delicate, comes off, and then you can get to the battery. You might even have to take both of them out. So this is quite a common issue. The 9-volt batteries, they don't last forever, and these are quite tricky to get in. You've really got to put quite a bit of force on that to get that back in there. So what are the options that we have here? So as we say that, from a single-use battery point of view, this is not great for the environment. It's not practical to keep replacing the battery, and it wears out this pressure fit holders. And also, this has led to a number of different solutions that people have come up with. So if you go to like Thingiverse, you'll see loads of different battery type compartments. I've tried one myself, putting a little sliding flap at the bottom where you can get the battery from underneath. People have done things with 18650 batteries where it kind of sits alongside the mechanical tracks. There's AA and AAA battery compartments that people have made, or they've hung it off the back, a little kind of backpack, and also things like flat LiPo batteries as well. So I always think these look a little bit odd, and they're not really part of the original design of the SMARS robot. So for me, the most practical solution is to use a rechargeable 9-volt battery. That's the best solution. It doesn't have to be removed. It can stay in the robot. It can be charged many, many times, thousands of times. And it is a little bit more expensive than a regular battery. But with multiple uses, that cost will be more cost efficient, and it's certainly more environmentally friendly. So if you don't do that, you'll end up having to buy loads and loads of batteries from your favourite supplier until you buy a rechargeable battery. So that's batteries. Let's get my motor that's just fallen on the floor. So next up we have wheel holes. This is one I've heard quite a few people struggle with, and I understand this one myself. And it's where the wheel connects to the motor spindle. So there's kind of a Goldilocks zone. We don't want the wheel to be too tightly fitted onto the motor where you just can't get it to fit in there. And also you don't want it to be too loose. So if I just go over to the overhead for a second. So I've got a motor here, and I've got a number of different wheels that we can try with this. So this white one I know is too slack. So if I find the flat piece of the spindle and put that into place there, it's way too slack. So that's just going to fall off if I put that into place there. It'll stay on, but as soon as any force is applied, it'll fall right off. Whereas these other two, so I've got this one here for example, if I try pushing that on there, it's such a tight fit, it's just not going to fit into place. And I think this red one, there's just no way at all that's going to fit in any way. It's just the tolerances of the 3D printer just mean that it doesn't mate well with that very nicely. So one of the solutions is I have a number of small files, and this is my favourite one, which is the round one. It's just perfect for opening up these holes. So it's got kind of a tapered edge to it, so I will simply put that in there, give it a bit of a twist just to remove a tiny bit of plastic material, not too much, and then I'll try again until I get this to fit better. So that's not there, and it might take several attempts, but I'm going to do it a little bit at a time, because once you've taken the material away, you can't really put it back in there, so you need to just be careful. So that might take you know, 5-10 minutes of just working that hole and just making it slightly larger so that this will fit in and then into place. So that's what I use, these little files. This one's from McAllister, no relation to me at all. So that's how we open up when the hole's too tight. Another solution, if the fit is too loose, so the example that I had with this white one where it's just too loose, is to use our friend super glue. So I use just regular kind of super glue, and I'll just put a little spot onto the end of the spindle, and then I'll just put the spindle into place and just leave it, and then that'll be rock solid. Obviously I do that when this is actually fitted into the robot, because once that super glue's on there, it's not coming off. It ain't coming off. So it is a permanent fix. So if it's too tight, just use a small file. If it's too loose, a spot of super glue should do the trick. You probably can get away with super glue. If you put a really small amount on it, it'll be enough to make it fix to it. But if you really need to take that wheel off, you can probably just force it off and it will come off. So as long as you don't overdo it with the super glue, should be fine. So next up we have Bluetooth connections. This is another very common issue that people come across. The amount of times I've answered problems that questions that people have had on the Facebook SmarsFan community group to do with Bluetooth, untold. So it might seem like witchcraft at first, Bluetooth, because it's if you're as old as me, it's a newish technology, so you think, oh, how does this actually work? But really, it's just UART. It's just a transmit and a receive. It's just a very, very simple serial communication. It's just 4 wires, ground and voltage, and then you've got your transmit and your receive. So from an Arduino point of view, very, very simple for us to actually use. The most common issue that people try and do is they connect it to pin 0 and 1. There's lots of code out there, and the problem with pin 0 and 1 is when you connect your Arduino to your USB, that also uses pin 0 or 1 to communicate with the chip on board to flash the code to do its bootstrapping. So if you put a Bluetooth off the end of that Bluetooth is listening all the time for any commands that are coming through. And when this boots up, it will communicate internally using that transmit and receive lines, and it'll mess up any communication to the chip. So that's one of the very common reasons why Bluetooth doesn't appear to work. The other one is that people will be a bit too enthusiastic at first, and they will try to pair to their Bluetooth chip, because all you need to do to pair your Bluetooth chip is just give it power. You don't need to send any data to it from the Arduino. All the technology is on board, all the software is on board the actual Bluetooth module to connect to your phone. But if you pair it to your phone, it makes it go into a different mode. So don't pair it at first, only pair it after you've loaded code onto your Arduino and you're ready to use it, because you might want to do some AT commands. And AT commands allow you to do things like rename the Bluetooth device or set the baud rate, which is the transfer speed, and so on. So always best practice just not to pair it until you've got your code loaded onto your Arduino and you're ready to go. So let's just have a little bit more look at this. So as I said, there's only 4 pins. Some modules, just seeing if I had a few to hand here. I've got one just here. This is I've marked it as an AT9. Which is a type of Bluetooth module. You can see it's got 6 pins there. So really it's just, as this diagram here, we've got an enable and we've got a state pin. We don't care about them, they're not important. What we do care about is the voltage and the ground, and the transmit and the receive. So that's all we need to know about, transmit and receive. And then from a wiring point of view, we just need to make sure that our transmit and receives switch over. So whatever the transmit and receive is on the Bluetooth, we want the opposite ones to go to the Arduino. So you can see there we've got pin 2, which is our blue one, is our transmit, and that's going to the receive on the Bluetooth module, and the other way around. So the receive is going to the transmit on there. So it is as simple as that. You can ignore this other little module I've got on here. That was just for another thing I was doing for the face module. But yeah, I always use pins 2 and 3 and use a software serial. So one of the other things as well is these modules that I recommend, if I just grab one of these robots, I use the Fujimoto boards. That's the motor shield there. And that has on it some header pins just here, and it says Bluetooth on it. ignore them. They are actually hardwired to pin 0 and pin 1, which we know doesn't work. And it's a bit frustrating because you can actually nicely plug in your Bluetooth module into those header pins. It's just that it won't work for you if you try doing that. I've had very little success doing that. Whereas if I use pins 2 and 3 and create a software serial, it works every single time, guaranteed. So it just reiterates on the slide there, don't use pin 0 and pin 1 for your Bluetooth connection. And from a software point of view, if you want to just create a bit of code just to test this out, all you need to do there is just include the software serial header, create a software serial called MySerial on pins 2 and 3, and then in your setup you just want to begin that MySerial with the baud rate of 9600, and then do serial.begin, which is your regular pin 0 and pin 1, because when you go to the Arduino IDE and you load up the serial monitor, that's printing things and listening to pin 0 and pin 1, which is this end USB. So that's what this particular piece of code is. It's basically being a man in the middle, and anything you send out to your software serial, it will echo to the hardwired serial. So that's all it's going to do there. It's going to say if MySerial, which is our software one, is available, then serial, which is the USB one, .write whatever is on MySerial.read. So it kind of just passes everything forward, and then it passes it back by doing if serial.available, which is the USB one, then MySerial, which is our software one, write serial.read. So that little piece of code there enables you to make like a terminal between your Bluetooth device and the IDE serial monitor. So you can type commands like your AT commands, you can see what your module is called, and so on. So if you want to know more about that, I did do a video on Bluetooth. I'll just make a little note there to include that in the description. So that's Bluetooth. So next up we have motor shields. So motor shields, I get questions all the time about these. These are very, very commonly asked. So I always use the Fujimoto motor shields for a number of reasons, and I'll get onto that in a second. But before we get onto motor shields, it's important to know that your Arduino has all these different header pins, and on the screen there you can see what all those header pins mean. They all have a particular significance, and when we're writing code we need to know what they are. And when we put a motor shield on top of our Arduino, all we're doing, you can physically see that they're connecting one-to-one to these top ones. However, things like the how we control the motors on and off, that usually steals 2 pins. So every motor steals 2 pins. One is for the speed and one is for the direction. So if you've got 2 motors there, then it's going to steal 4 pins. And which pins they are depends on what type of motor shield you have. So if you want to build a SMARS robot and use code that's commonly available, have a look in the code to see what kind of shield they recommend, because it's best if it's paired with that, or that you understand which pins control the motors, because otherwise you'll try loading somebody else's code and it just won't work and you'll get frustrated with that. So what I've done on this slide here is covered off quite a few of the common motor shields. So that motor shield that we've got there, the official one, I've got that one plugged into this SMARS robot here. So you can see there it says, you can see the little logo just there, it's the official Arduino motor shield. So that one's got a number of other header pins on the top there for things like servos and other kind of connectors that you can put in there. All we really need it for is just the motors. So that's what we're interested in there, just the motors A and B. And that controls the left and right motors. The Fujimoto motor shield, which is on this one here, you can see that's got a number of extra components. We've got things like this buzzer here, we've got some rangefinder pins, we've got the power there, we've got the motors. We've got that Bluetooth that we want to ignore. We also have over here, I can just put that back on place there, some pins for some header pins for servos. So if we want to do something like control this this bucket on here, which has a servo, we can plug that into the one of those servo pins. So the Fujimoto is a bit different than the official one because of this buzzer. The buzzer is hardwired to pin 4. The echo and the trigger for the rangefinder, which is these yellow ones, there the trigger is pin 7, the echo is pin 8, so we need to know that when we're writing our code to make sure that's the same. And the motors A and B, we go to the there's a slide in a second that's got the exact pinouts for those as well. And you can see there the kind of wiring diagram. So we've got the rangefinder that can go directly into those yellow header pins. The 9-volt battery just goes in the side, and the motors A and B. So B is left, A is right, and that's it. That's all we need to do. So the difference between the Fungimoto and the Motor Shield, the official Arduino Motor Shield, is first of all that it has that echo, trigger and buzzer. So the official one doesn't have those. We can see they're on pins 8, 7 and 4 respectively. And then motor A and motor B, which is the direction. Motor A is 12 on both of them. B is 13 on both of them, but then the speed bit is where it changes. So pin's 10 on the Fungimoto, where it's pin 3 on the official Arduino one. And if you have one of the motor shields that has the, it doesn't have the header pins, and it's got kind of 3 chips along the top, I believe that works exactly the same as the official Arduino shield, so use the pins 3 and 11 for the speed. That should be fine. I did have one of them, but I couldn't find it to do this video, so apologies for that. But I have got all the other different types. So there's another one here which is from Deek Robot. It looks very, very similar, if not an exact clone of the official Arduino motor shield. So it's got all those header pins there for whatever they are. They look like they are servo. At least those 4 are servo header pins. Okay, and then to wire in Bluetooth on top of that, to that little diagram, we just use pins 2 and 3 again, which we talked about earlier. So next up we have the tracks. This is the #1 issue that people come up against. If they've figured out the code, they've figured out everything else, they printed this out, and then they're frustrated because it's either it's too tight or it's too loose. So I think the tracks make the SMARS robot really interesting. So, you know, mechanically they're interesting. They really do work. They make it so that it can go over any surface just using 2 motors that sort of symmetrically opposite sides, diagonally symmetrical, that is. And yeah, it can climb over all different terrain because it's got these tracks. One of the cool things about it is how you actually connect these pieces of track together. So you actually use pieces of filament, so just regular filament. I've got rolls and rolls of filament up here above, and you just slice a piece of that and then just squeeze the pieces together and put it in, and that's usually enough. So I've not done anything fancy on these to sort of hold them in place. This sort of friction and stress of this thing keep it in place. If it's too slack, they might fall out. So I have found that if the motors are too fast, so I've got one that's this one here. If I just put that back together a little bit. So this one has been through the walls, and you can see here the tracks on it are quite slack. On that one it's actually sort of dangling down a little bit. So this one has the opposite problem that most people have, in that it's too slack. And it's rare that you would get it to print first time and it would be absolutely perfect. Most times it's too tight. So you'll have to come up with, you'll have to do one of the things that we can suggest on the next slide. So it's very common to have problems with a track. And what I wanted to illustrate here is just why that is. So I did the math before. I went into Excel and I typed in the dimensions of one piece of track, and then I multiplied that by 16 because there is 16 pieces of track per side. If you want to count them out, you can do. It's 8 pieces per wheel in effect. And if you just adjust that by 1%, so you make it 1% larger or 1% smaller, the difference that can be over them 16 segments can be 3 millimeters, which is huge. It's enough to make it either really tight or really slack. So that's why this issue comes about, is because we're actually using one piece of track and we're putting it together 16 times. So any variance in your 3D printer, and it only has to be 1% variance, which is really small when we're talking about a part that's, you know, 13 millimeters tall. That's why we can have it as up to 3 millimeters out. So that's what it's to do with tolerances. So one of the solution is to print out, if it's too tight, to print out two pieces that are about 10% larger on the y-axis, which is the, as you look at it, it's the axis. You want to stretch it out. You do have to just make sure that it doesn't distort the hole where you put the filament in, but that's what you need to do there, is just look at stretching it by 10%, and then if you do two of them and then do them at sort of opposite sides of the track, you don't want them right next to each other, just because they might sort of, because they are slightly larger, when it goes around the wheel, if they're right next to each other, it can kind of come out of sequence where it mates with those little diamond holes. So you want them kind of opposite sides of the track ideally. If it still doesn't fit, if it's still too tight, I'd print out another couple. If you're printing more than 4 pieces, you might not want to do 10%, you might want to just reduce that down to like 5%, but print everything out 5% larger than it needs to be. And the way that you can do that, if you go into Cura, you can actually stretch the part by a percentage. So, and for bonus tip for keeping your tracks on track, is when you cut the filament, what I always do, if I just show you some examples of this, I always have one piece of filament, and it's just that piece there on here. Let's just show you there. I always have one piece that's slightly prouder than the rest. All the rest of them are quite flush, but that's the one that if I need to take this track apart, it's dead easy for me to sort of pull that one out and then get to the track. So this track is pretty well on there. There's no bending. If I show you this part, this SMARS. The track on this one, in fact, if I do it off the overhead, it might be easier to show you. The wheels are actually pinching in, so they're kind of like that as an extreme. They're pinching in. The track is sort of making them pinch that kind of direction if you look at them. I don't know if you can see that very clearly on there, but it's kind of making them point so that they're not running smoothly. And as I turn it, it's really not very smooth. Whereas on the Slack one, you can see these wheels are sort of pointing out 90 degrees to the chassis, and it's very easy for them to turn. And similar with this one, it's ever so slightly tight on there. Oops, that's just falling out there. But it's not too tight. It's just slightly tighter than it should be. That might benefit from just one piece being slightly larger than the rest. So that's one thing that we can do. We can just we could just leave one piece slightly larger than the rest, so it's easier to take out, but the rest of them I'd have completely flush, and I would always have the piece that's poking out like that on the outside. If you have it on the inside, it's just going to catch on the chassis, so just on the outside. And then the other thing, using our friend super glue, once again, we can put a tiny dab of that onto the to the pieces of track. So I would put it just on the actual hole. I would dab it onto the actual piece of filament, and it will still pivot because that will make it stick to the piece of track. But where it's actually bending, that isn't affected. That's on the inside piece, which is on this diagram. This piece here. So if we glue here, that's going to make this stick to this, but this can still pivot round, so it's fine. It's permanent if you do that. You're not likely to be able to unstick that if you use your super glue, but it does stop the pieces falling out. And like I said, this one has been through the walls quite a bit. That does happen if the motor's in this one about 300 RPM, so it goes very, very fast, very, very quickly, and then it just shatters its tracks. So that's one way to do it. Other people will use a soldering iron and just sort of dab the end of it. Remember, you are burning plastic, so you will get fumes if you do that, and it's obviously a hot iron as well. You might damage your track, so I think the super glue is a better option for that. So that's the tip there. So if you like these tips for SMARS, why not give me a like and a comment and a bit of a subscribe as well. Always helps out the channel. If you want to support the channel as well, you can always buy me a coffee. If you go to buymeacoffee.com/Kevin McAleer, you can help pay for the website hosting. And I've got some major updates coming to that, some new learning platform coming to that very soon. Just been working on that this evening. And also the graphics software, the streaming software that I use. And somebody was asking about that. Was it Brian or who else was it? There's somebody else asking me about what streaming software I use, and I use Ecamm Live. And obviously all the equipment as well that I use. So if you want to help out and support the channel, you can do that there. If you've not checked out the website, this is where all the information that I write up is stored. So there's lots of tutorials, videos, code, all kinds of stuff on there. So you can even buy parts on there if you want to. So smarsfan.com is the place to go there. And the other thing I wanted to say was that we have a new video every Sunday. So I'll go live every Sunday. I tend to try and get a midweek video in like this one, but also every Sunday, 7 PM Greenwich Mean Time, soon to be British Summer Time, every Sunday. So if you live in the Americas or in Canada, you can see the time zones on the left-hand column. If you live in the EU region, India, Pakistan or Russia, you're in the middle column most likely. Or if you're in Australia and China, you're probably in the rightmost column. We do have some people from Australia and New Zealand as well join every now and again. So hello to you guys and gals. So I think that is everything. Yep, I've covered that off. So thanks for watching. This was just a quick video just to show you the sort of top 5 issues with SMARS and how to resolve them. If there's anything you think I should have covered that I haven't covered off, I'd be really interested to know what those issues are that you've come up against, and we can cover that in a sort of part 2 of this. So I'm really interested in just getting people building SMARS robots and enjoying building robots with for themselves or for their family. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.